Hello and welcome to the special business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, October 22nd. Holland Squallen, Quistluktmuk, Tla Squamish Oakmail. As always, we're glad to do our work today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. Please be advised that this council meeting is being live streamed, recorded, and will be available to the public to view on the District of Squamish's website following the meeting. If you have concerns, please notify the corporate officer present at the meeting. Council, we have an amended agenda before us. If someone looking for adoption, moved by Councillor French and seconded, thank you, by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Motion carries. And I just wanted to point out that we have Councillor Stoner is joining us, participating remotely today. So you'll be hearing from her throughout if you don't see her on your screen as of yet. So we'll move on to item 3, staff reports. And the main event is 2025 to 2029 utilities financial plan work. And I will pass it over to Ms. Boxrud to introduce herself and her team and take us through the presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Heather Boxrud, General Manager of Financial IT and Procurement Services, and my pronouns are she, her, so I can be addressed accordingly. I'm joined here today by Laura Turner, Director of Financial Planning and Reporting, and Rianne Sousa, Director of Financial Operations, will join us later on in the presentation. As well, we have many budget managers online or in council chambers to support council with any questions you may have. We're here today to present the Utilities Workshop, Utilities Fund Workshop for 25 to 29 financial plan. So in terms of the agenda, we have a bit of a lighter agenda today than last week's workshop. I will start off with a reminder of the budget workshop timelines and guiding principles and some key highlights and challenges facing the Utilities Fund's financial plans. Ms. Turner will then walk us through the utility fund rates, some highlights of the special operating and capital plans, and managers are here to showcase a few notable projects. Ms. Turner will then go through the reserve continuity schedules, and Ms. Sousa will review the district's borrowing. So each year, the district works toward adoption of the budget in December to enable staff to begin work on their projects and programs right away in January of the following year. Shown here is this year's timeline for the 25 to 29 financial plan. We're currently at the 4th stage of the multi-stage process, presenting the Utility Fund's financial plan. Upcoming workshops include on October 29th, staff will tie it all together and present a draft budget that incorporates changes to date made throughout each of the October workshops. As well, staff will be prepared to address any unanswered questions, council questions from all 4 of the previous workshops in the Tying It All Together workshop. The budget open house will take place on November 6th, and what we heard from that event presented to council on November 19th. And finally, the first 3 readings of the utility rates bylaw and the 2025 to 29 financial plan will occur on December 3rd and 10th, respectively, with adoption of the financial plan on December 17th. The district conducts its financial planning process as outlined in the long-term financial plan guiding principles and financial plan policy, which has 4 principal categories that were developed to guide management and council in the financial planning process. I won't go into the details as we did present them in detail in the October 1st budget kickoff, but the categories include stable and sufficient, sustainable and equitable, prudent and flexible, and efficient and measurable. There are a number of notable elements to the Utility Fund's financial plan that I'd like to highlight. The district currently operates 3 separate utility funds, which are separated in the financial architecture and raise their own revenues through user rates and contain their own operating expenditures, borrowing, and reserves. Property taxation is not used to fund any part of the utility funds. Growth, which is volume of customers, and rate increases contribute to the funding formula of the utility rates. Support staff, which are generally referenced as finance, IT, communications, legislative services, and procurement departments, and management staff are shared across the 3 utility funds and the general fund. This is done primarily through an expenditure allocation. Reserves are the primary funding source of the utilities fund's capital plan, and when capital plans are insufficient, borrowing is used. Therefore, reserve building is a critical function for the utility fund infrastructure. DCCs are also an important funding source for the utility fund capital plan, and when DCCs reserves are insufficient, the district will rely on borrowing to make up that gap. In this case, the DCCs will pay for the principal and interest in the funds borrowed for the project. Grants tend to be less available for utility infrastructure, although the district has been successful in obtaining grants in the past. In September 2023, Council endorsed the Asset Management Reserve Funding Strategy, or AMRFS, which included the 2022 asset management recommendations and incorporated additional capital requirements included in the 2023 to 2027 financial plan to provide a target reserve contribution strategy that would work towards sufficient and sustainable reserves for a long-term capital program. The AMRFS recommendation is to increase the utility rates for additional reserve contributions by 1.8% for water, 3.4% for wastewater, and 0.2% for the solid waste fund. The utility funds face similar financial challenges to the general fund, with increased cost pressures, increased borrowing costs, and labor market competitiveness. Inflation, supply chain, and supplier availability continue to be a challenge, although inflation is now projecting to ease in coming years. These pressures are felt across all departments and within all projects, including the utility funds. In 2024, the district ratified the Canadian Union of Public Employees 3-year agreement. The costs associated with this agreement have annualization impacts on the 25 to 29 financial plan. The district faces a number of disruptors, which include significant labor challenges, primarily around pressures in order to remain competitive with Vancouver and the Lower Mainland to attract and retain skilled employees, minimize staffing vacancies, and have the necessary resources to execute the district's strategic, operational, and capital plans. As with most BC municipalities, historical DCC rates have outpaced rising costs of capital construction, leaving the district's DCC reserves insufficient to fund all of the DCC projects, therefore require extensive capital prioritization and reliance on borrowing. A major DCC bylaw update is scheduled in 2024 and will take effect in 2025. Finally, as noted in the previous slide, the 2025 to 29 financial plan will continue investment in the district's efforts towards the proactive management and adequate reserve building efforts of the district's capital program and asset management reserve funding strategy. The 2025 to 29 financial plan has taken a thoughtful and measured approach to addressing the challenges and cost pressures. Some highlights of efforts include the district implemented new financial planning software system, which has provided better forecasting and analysis tools to review, forecast, and reduce operating costs. This allowed the district to absorb inflation and reduce costs across all departmental budgets, and was a critical part of minimizing costs. In addition, the new software aided the ability to analyze and improve support and management staff expenditure allocation. The review was conducted this summer, resulting in the discovery that the wastewater was underpaying its share of the expenditures. Staff are therefore recommending that the wastewater reserve be utilized to smooth the additional expenditures over a few years to ensure a stable rate increase in the wastewater fund. The new software provides the ability to review the allocation regularly. As with the general fund, the utilities fund capital requirements continue to grow, and a methodology shift and process improvement for the district is to attribute the staff that are focused on capital implementations to be funded by capital projects themselves. This improvement ensures the accurate cost of the capital project is captured and accounted for within the asset management reserve funding strategy, and allows the district the flexibility to scale up resources necessary to execute the capital plan and scale down resources when the capital plan is reduced. Staff continue to apply rigor for the project prioritization when scheduling within financial plan, which I will speak to in the next slide. So as with the general fund, the utilities project plans for both special operating projects and capital projects is determined by a set of criteria to guide staff on priority and timing. A primary criteria for determining what is put into the utility fund project plans are projects that address risk to the district, including critical asset replacement risk, projects that address health and safety concerns, or address a high degree of financial risk. The plan prioritizes addressing legislation-driven projects. For example, for capital, this could mean a new regulation that requires an infrastructure upgrade. And for special operating projects, this could mean new legislation that requires a policy or accounting standard update. The project plan is also driven by the district's strategic plan, with highlights priority projects in council's term and guided by the district's 15+ master plans. Funding availability is limited, therefore careful consideration is given to building the project plan timelines based on prioritization criteria and funding availability. As noted in the previous slide, funding for projects include reserves, borrowing, grants when available, and DCCs and user fees. Finally, the project planning requires balancing staff resources and capacity to complete the plan, so consideration on what is realistically achievable with the current staff complement is required. And so with that, I will hand it over to Ms. Turner.
Great, thank you. My name is Laura Turner, Director of Financial Planning and Reporting. My pronouns are she, her, so I can be addressed accordingly. For the water utility, staff are recommending a 1.8% rate increase, which is based on the recommendation of the Asset Management Reserve Funding Strategy. This increase will add approximately $214,000 to the current water capital reserve contribution for a total of $2.4 million in 2025. At this rate and estimated growth in customers, revenues are sufficient to meet the operating expenses required of the water fund. For the wastewater utility, staff are recommending a 5.7% rate increase. This is based on a 3.4% increase under the Asset Management Reserve Funding Strategy, which will add approximately $500,000 to the wastewater reserve contribution for a total of $3.2 million in 2025. An additional 2.3% is required to cover increased costs of the fund, including a reallocation of 2 positions from the water fund. In addition, as a result of the review of the management and staff expenditure reallocation, the wastewater reserve will be used to cover the increased costs in the 25 and 26 fiscals, which will maintain stable and consistent rate increases. As a reminder, DCCs were insufficient to fund the wastewater treatment plant upsize, and the district relied on borrowing to fund the project. Therefore, in the 25 to 29 financial plan, DCCs will be used to cover debt servicing costs related to the project. For solid waste, staff are recommending a rate increase of 5.2% for all sizes of totes. This is based on a 0.2% increase under the Asset Management Reserve Funding Strategy, plus 5% required to cover debt servicing costs. It's important to note that for 2025, the recommended rate increase of 5.2% will not generate sufficient revenues to cover all costs within the fund, including the Asset Management Reserve funding and debt. Therefore, to maintain stable and consistent rate increases, the solid waste reserve will be used to cover debt servicing costs in 2025 and will be replenished in 2026 after the final debt payments are made on the landfill vertical wall. Utility special operating projects total $1.7 million over the 5 years of the financial plan. Total for 2025 is $718,000 and includes residual waste management long-term planning, which is funded from reserves, Squamish and master water supply inspection and maintenance of $300,000, which is also funded from reserves, the sewer master plan updates of $75,000 funded from DCCs, and an additional wastewater treatment utility operator of just over $100,000 to address increased workload associated with it, WLNG and Fortis work counts. And this will be externally funded. Utility capital projects total $75 million over the 5 years of the financial plan, with $10 million planned for 2025. Notable projects for 25 include Powerhouse Springs chlorination injection chamber of $1 million, water system repairs and replacements of $2.6 million, sanitary sewer annual repairs and maintenance of $1.1 million, lift station refurbishment and replacement of $2 million, and wastewater treatment plant upgrades of $1 million, which is funded by DCCs. I'll now turn it over to staff to speak to 2 major projects included in the utilities financial plan.
Good afternoon. My name is Jesse Morwood. I'm the Capital Projects Manager here at the district. So one project that was noted in the RTC it was the wastewater treatment headworks building, and it was highlighted due to a $3.1 million budget increase. A quick background on the headworks building. It's the first step of processing of wastewater that comes into the wastewater treatment plant. Its main objectives are to remove foreign objects and grit from the wastewater. In 2021, it was identified that the current headworks building is highly vulnerable to seismic structural damage during a seismic event. As a result, in 2022, a budget for the building was added to the 5-year financial plan. The project goals for the building are to meet post-disaster seismic standards, raise the building above the flood control level, increase screening grit removal to accommodate future growth, and incorporate additional facilities such as lab in the blower room. The changes to the financial plan, as I mentioned, were $3.1 million, increase of $3.1 million. This is to reflect the higher inflation, reflect inflation costs since 2021, as well as to accommodate for capitalized staffing. As well, the change was we moved construction timing 2 years, so it would actually, it's intended to start in 2028 and go through 2029.
Good afternoon. My name is Shannon White. I'm the Integrated Solid Waste Specialist at the District of Squamish, and I'm here to present on the lateral expansion of our landfill in Squamish. So as many of the room are aware, the Squamish landfill, which receives waste from the District of Squamish, Electoral Area D of the SLRD, and Squamish Nation will reach capacity by the beginning of in late 2030. While staff are continually working to increase diversion and the amount of recyclables that end up in the landfill, staff are also working to ensure that there will be continued capacity for disposal beyond 2030. The solution that staff are working on is a lateral expansion of our current landfill to the east, which will increase capacity for the community's waste management. The landfill expansion will include an upgrade to the transfer station, increased diversion opportunities, better traffic flow through, shape pretreatment, and increased landfill gas collection, amongst other upgrades. In 2023 and 2024, staff updated the original 2019 concept design, which will maximize the available airspace by building onto the current landfill and allowing for higher piling of garbage in 4 distinct phases, spreading the capital costs over a longer period of time, enabling the landfill expansion to be fiscally feasible. Staff are currently working through the permitting process and acquiring the land. The intent is to begin detailed design in 2026, with construction happening from late 2027 to 2029, with waste being accepted in early 2030. The first phase, which is the most expensive phase as it includes critical infrastructure required to satisfy regulatory requirements, is currently budgeted in the 2025 to 2029 financial plan at $19.4 million.
I think we'll pause there for questions and discussion.
Thank you very much. Can I get you just take the slide down
Yeah.
for now so I can help see everybody on the screen? Council, who would like to get this started here? Councilor Penningal, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple things. One, a bigger, can staff remind me of where or how we are thinking about this landfill in the longer asset planning? Like, I know it's in our 5-year plan. I know it was explained why it's not in our asset management funding plan, but where does that go so we sort of understand longer term where this lives?
Thank you for the question through the mayor. So the asset management plan, it's not incorporated into that because it's not considered a replacement of an asset. And then in terms of the asset management reserve funding strategy, at the time when we were working through that, we only had the 23 to 27 financial plan. And so it hadn't been on that radar. Hence the reason why a 10-year capital plan is so important. It will then get picked up in the next asset management reserve funding strategy.
Okay, and that's the next couple of years, or when is that again?
The recommendation for the asset management reserve funding strategy is every 2 to 3 years. However, the priority next year will be to work on the 10-year plans. We likely will not have the resources to be able to do the asset management reserve funding strategy next year. So the year after, so year 3.
Okay, thank you. And then I think it's in this section, there's a fleet, Ford F-150 fleet waste management. And we had a bunch of fleet stuff last week. Is this here only because it's utility and everything utility has to be as part of the utility discussion, even fleet?
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay. Then my last one, and this one I've asked about before, but this wastewater treatment operator related to waste from the wood fiber and Fortis camps. Given our previous EAO feedback about not wanting to process camp waste and what I recall as council discussions, I was surprised to see this here at all. But given the EAO conditions and we decided not to have the Fortis camp, I'm wondering why this is still in our budget.
Ms. Latimer?
Thank you through the mayor. Megan Latimer, General Manager of Community Services. So this item was put in the budget as a placeholder should the camp be in place for next year. It would have been fully fully funded through cost recovery. So at this point, staff are likely looking to remove this in the tying it all together conversation.
Yep, go ahead, follow up.
Glad to hear it's being pulled out, but I do have a concern I want to flag because my understanding of council discussions thus far is that we didn't want to be doing this and it wasn't a budget thing or who is paying for it. My understanding was, and so I have a bit of concern around there and maybe there's a reason.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Stoner.
Yeah, I'll take that. Our bylaws put the responsibility for the decision to accept waste and the staff level. So that's why it was in there. And discussions were ongoing. We hadn't finalized that yet. So it is a staff decision to accept waste from there by our bylaws.
This may require then some follow-up discussions because, again, we had council resolutions, I think, in terms of EAO feedback and so on. So I feel like there's, even when it's staff decision, I understand it follows council policy. And so I think the policy precedent from my perspective was there. So maybe this requires maybe not at this moment, but a follow-up conversation. Thank you.
I think just on this one, if we could focus on the decision of the day was whether these items should be included or not included in the budget, given that there's some varied rationale on sort of all of the items in there. If we can focus on that piece to get through the sort of what we need today, and then, but point made in those other areas. Are you okay with that approach for now, Councillor?
Yeah, I think I heard that it's coming out and I don't think it should be there and we can have a follow-up discussion about the other pieces later.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've got Councillor Hamilton and then Councillor Stoner.
Thanks very much. So focusing on the biggest items first, on the solid waste, residual waste long-term planning and the wastewater treatment plant headworks building. Those are each approximately 20 million in our 5-year plan. How does that, where do I find how that impacts our borrowing capacity over the next 5 years? I assume I assume you've worked it out. I just don't know where to find the numbers of what impact that $20 million of borrowing will have on our borrowing capacity.
Through the mayor, thank you for the question. We will be bringing that back through the loan authorization process. But in terms of the total overall borrowing that the 2025 to 2029 financial plan brings us or brings the district to is 17.6%.
And that's 17.6 by the end of 2029. That's projected to be 17.6. Is that right?
Through the mayor, yes, that's correct.
Great, thanks. That's reasonably healthy. My next question is about sort of that next largest bucket of things. Water systems, sanitary sewer replacements, and lift station repairs and replacements. These are totaling between between $5 and $10 million each over the next 5 years. And these are clearly things that are just keeping up with the infrastructure that's already in the ground. My question is, I'm not sure how it's going to, I'm not sure how you could answer this, but are we keeping up with the infrastructure that's in the ground, or should council be considering mechanisms to support more funding for this important in-ground infrastructure to maintain it at a level so that it doesn't run to failure? Because we've had the Queensway lift station failure. Should council be considering more funding in this area in order to prevent failures in the future?
Good afternoon, David Rolston, Senior Manager of Infrastructure Planning. So we have a number of different master plans that guide our infrastructure investments. That starts with the asset management plan as the highest level, and it looks at sustainable funding levels to ensure that we're maintaining our assets to acceptable levels of service. So as Ms. Bogsrud mentioned earlier, we have developed a financial plan and reserve funding strategy to ensure that we're working towards developing those funding levels to basically to deliver on our asset management plan. So we are investing at recommended levels as identified in our asset management plan. And in addition to that, we also do asset-specific master plans. So this year we'll be beginning an update to our sewer master plan. Our existing one is from 2018, and that's guided our expenditures over the last 6 years. That's scheduled to be completed next year, and that will continue to give us guidance, from 2026 to 2030, roughly. In addition to that, we also do condition assessments of our various infrastructures. So we've recently completed a lift station condition assessment, and we're continually assessing the condition of our sewers as well. So all of that leads into our capital plan to ensure that we're maintaining assets to an acceptable level.
And so the reviews of our lift station and sewer systems, has that been concluded, or is that work ongoing?
We completed a one-time condition assessment of our lift stations. That was completed, I believe, a couple of years ago. So that is informing the investments in our lift stations in the near term. That's something that we would periodically update, but we do inspect our sewers on an annual basis. And so we basically have a rolling program where we're inspecting our entire sewer network on about a 10-year cycle, which is in alignment with best practice to ensure that we're assessing any degradation of our assets and keeping on top of that.
So I hope the line of my questioning is really, I want to support the annual repairs and replacements at clearly a higher level than we've been doing up to now, because I absolutely recognize that we try to make infrastructure last as long as possible. But education, learning from the Queensway lift station, the inability to allocate enough funding to get that done on time led to it failing and costing more money in the end. I don't have a motion or a directed, this is not the moment where I can direct, where I can help to direct any specific funds. But if there is more money needed to make sure our sewer and water systems are kept up, please let us know. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Stoner.
Thank you, through the chair. While Mr. Rolston is in the seat, come back. Follow up on Councillor Hamilton's question. So that specific line item around the water system annual repairs and replacement, it says the description states that it's sitting at approximately 2% based on a 2011 asset management plan. So I have two questions. One, 2% of what? And then also, are we confident that that number is still reliable given that the master plan is now 13 years old?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. And admittedly, the description in the budget could probably stand to be updated, referencing the 2011 asset management plan, which has been replaced by the 2022 asset management plan, as well as the 2015 water master plan. And also like to highlight that the updated water master plan will be presented next month to council. But with that said, we are in rough alignment with that 2%. To answer your question, the 2% is of the total asset value within the water utility. So based on the asset management plan, that's $177 million is the total value of assets within our water utility. And so our capital investment is in a rough alignment with that 2% value. The updated asset management plan has recommended updated levels of investment. But again, we're in rough alignment and we're in alignment with our water master plan and our asset management plan.
Awesome. Thank you very much. You're off the hook now. My next question is probably to somebody else, which is around the shift in the FTE. So the report to council says that there's an increase of 2.3% in the wastewater rates, which is largely driven by a reallocation of 2 FTEs from the water to the wastewater utilities. However, I didn't see a corresponding reduction in the water utility rates. So I'm just wondering what happened to that money as the FTEs transferred from one to the other.
Thank you for the question through the mayor. I think the question could be framed in a way that it describes that the water recommendation isn't going up because the reduction in that transfer. So the overall increases to the water utility was also an amount. It's just been now negated by that. And so the only increase is the increase of the asset management reserve funding strategy recommendation.
But those 2 FTEs still exist and aren't being paid for. And so, I don't know, it doesn't seem like it feels like it's cost neutral to me.
Let me try again. So the FTEs have been moved to the wastewater, which reduced the overall expenditures of the water. It negated or net neutraled any increases. So we are not recommending a rate increase.
Okay. Is there a list of things that are being covered by, like, it would be helpful to know what we're covering with that extra 2.3%. So they don't have the additional 2 staff, but what are they getting?
Through the chair, we don't have a list in front of us. It's a myriad of a number of expenditures across the entire fund. So it's not a one-for-one sort of allocation. It's basically the whole expenditures of the fund, including the asset management reserve funding strategy, any debt. That whole entire fund is what the rates cover.
Okay. And then the service level changes also identify the addition of a junior electrician. And the description states that much of that work is being done by contracted services currently. And so I'm wondering how much of that cost for that FT is being offset by savings of contract services.
Good afternoon. My name is Ben Konashenko. I'm the utilities manager for the District of Squamish, and thank you for the question. Through the mayor, I don't have the exact number of offset cost in front of me. I can certainly get that. It is a bit challenging. Our electrical team, although funded from water and sewer utilities, do kind of work across the district. So they cross-charge to facilities and other areas. So it's a bit challenging. In general, we across the district, I think our contracted services for electrical is between 300,000 and 400,000 a year. So there's a pot of money there to draw from.
And so this person would just be working for wastewater though, is that correct?
They will work primarily in our utilities, so servicing water and sewer, but likely will get drawn into other work areas as well.
And are we able to then do that funded through a utility if they're working elsewhere? Given the like we usually have a pretty tight lock on how utilities are funded and where that money is going. So I'm just curious how that works.
Can you help me out on how we cross-charge?
Yeah. Thank you for the question through the mayor. The position is allocated to the utilities and it's a service level change for the utility specifically, and it'll be allocated either on a time card basis or on the allocation that we subsequently were talking about. So it's a shared cost that is distributed across the utilities.
Okay, and then finally on this component, the purchase of the Ford F-150, the description of it says that it's for this FTE position, but the FTE has been pushed up by a year and the vehicle actually still isn't in the plan until 2027. So I'm just wondering if somebody can speak to that gap.
Thank you for the question, again, through the mayor. The intent was for this junior position to ride along with the more senior people and support the work they do. So we don't necessarily need another vehicle right away to allow them to do their work.
Thank you. And just on this point, Councillor Hamilton, you had something on this?
Yeah, I had another question about the junior electrician position. I noticed that the line item was for around $107,000, but our senior electricians, when we look at the Sophie report, they're in the range of 80 to 85,000 per year. So what makes up the difference between that line item that we see and the salaries that we pay our senior electricians?
Thank you for the question through the chair. So the Sophie is a bunch of different things. It also includes when someone's hired. So it could be prorated on the Sophie. It's literally that expenditure. The line items that we utilize in our service level change include benefits as well. So it's a nearly 30% increase.
Thank you.
Councillor Stoner, are you good for now? Okay. I've got Councillor Anderson and then French, then Greenlaw.
Mayor Herford, I had a question to start with on the landfill expansion. I wonder if that would be appropriate at this time, or is there going to be another presentation specifically on that topic?
Go ahead now.
Very good. All right then. In that report affixed in our package under risk management overview, there is an item number 2 in the table, and I'll just read it out. The province requires that the district to take on the liability related to the GFL-CRY, I don't have that acronym, land north of the landfill as part of the district buffer zone. I guess there's 3 questions here. I wonder if you may be able to, if staff could elaborate on a couple of aspects of that description. Firstly, is it a matter of if the province will require this, or is that anticipated that it will? Secondly, what is a buffer zone and why do we need one there? Thirdly, is it anticipated that there will be a change in the tenure status or land use of that parcel currently leased, I take it, from the Crown by GFL?
Thank you through the mayor. Excellent question. And I apologize for the acronym that is not explained in this overview. So just to reorder your questions, a buffer zone is required for all landfills as per the BC landfill criteria guidance document, which is regulated through the Environmental Management Act. And a buffer zone is supposed to be 50 meters around the footprint of a landfill of where the waste is accepted, and can, depending on where in the buffer zone you are, different things are allowed. The intent of a buffer zone is truly to provide a screening from neighboring properties around the site. That allows a landfill to, so that allows things like noise or potential traffic to have a bit of a buffer between the disturbance that potential neighboring properties might have. So there is currently a 50-meter buffer zone around most of our current landfill. That criteria came in after our landfill pre-exists the criteria. So we do not have a buffer zone in the north, and the CRY is the Chikai Recycle Yard, which is, as you stated, on land that is leased, or it is in some sort of tenure with the province. It is also a BC Hydro right-of-way, which is important to note. So as the District of Squamish pursues the landfill expansion, we will also be pursuing an exemption to the landfill criteria to have no buffer zone in that northern area, because already we do not have a buffer zone there, and we back right onto hydro right-of-way and an industrial use land. So there's a few reasons why, but that exemption will be requested in early 2025 when we submit the application package to the province. So that answers your first question. It's if. So we are hoping that there is an exemption and GFL CRY land can remain as is. We do not need to be involved in it. However, there is a chance, as explained in this risk management overview, that the province might not allow us that exemption, and then the District of Squamish will work very closely with GFL and the province and BC Hydro as to how to proceed in that way. The intent is not to impact the current operations of the GFL CRY though. And to that extent, the landfill expansion has been designed so that there will be continued access to that land through our site, as we currently have an MOU with GFL for them to access the site through our current landfill.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Mayor Herford, I had another question. It is perhaps also for Ms. White. In the report to council, there is a description of a proposal to pilot a new service to householders that have a large amount of organic waste or recyclables. Organics will be my focus here in my question. And it involves an extra fee and an extra organics tote. And I wonder if staff may be able to elaborate on how that picture of need was formed, survey or experience in dealing with our clients. And I'll give you the reason why I'm asking this is that from time to time, we have discussed in council and have received correspondence on the issue of not having regular weekly organics pickup during November and March, which are the two busiest months for people doing vegetation management in their gardens, various kinds, but it's definitely, those are the two times a year people do it, and we don't have weekly pickup. So we have discussed this from time to time in the context of the Wildfire Protection Plan, which should be encouraging active management of this kind of vegetation. We see risks in risk situations in every neighborhood. And also to curb dumping, which is an invasive species issue. It should not to be encouraged anyway. So I'm asking the question of how the picture is formed for this new proposal. And my consideration is we might also perhaps consider one day more regular service during those two times of year for organics pickup. I hope that might be clear enough. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Through the mayor, just to confirm, the question is what was the reasoning behind this program? Yeah, great, I'm getting head nods. And I do want to note that in the RTC, it does say that staff is uncertain as to how many people and how many households will be joining this program. That's why it has been framed as a pilot project. And in the 2027 budget preparations, staff will assess the program as it'll have been in place for 2 years at that point. And that's when we will review participation, how people are satisfied with the program, and whether it should be continued through 2027 and onwards. That being said, as highlighted, staff have been asked to consider extending weekly organics in the past. However, weekly organics does have a significant cost for every single additional week that is added. And there are a significant amount of households on our curbside collection that do not have a need for the service of extending organic collection. So for example, different multifamily home complexes that have little to no gardens, for example. So if we extend weekly organics, the cost of that would have to be spread all over the entire solid waste utility fund. And so in looking for a solution, because we recognize that there is demand for this service, staff have looked as how we can offer this opportunity for those who want it without financially penalizing those who don't need it. And that's where we have landed in offering this pilot program for residents, those who have wildfire management needs or extensive yard waste that they produce. They are able to sign up for an extra organics tote, or people can have an extra recycling tote if they have a large amount of recycling. And they can be part of this program, and they pay the fee without impacting those who do not need the service. And that's it.
Yeah, do you have a follow-up?
If I may
Councillor?
follow up, Ms. White, would you be considering some type of a survey or means for the public and users of the service to get back to you, say on our webpage or something like that, some kind of a opportunity for feedback and input into the program later?
Thank you, through the mayor. I think that is an excellent suggestion. As staff evaluates the program, we most definitely would do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Yep. On this point, Councillor. Yep, go ahead.
Just following up on Councillor Anderson's question and related, does the nature of the pilot allow us to understand if whether or not people are just signing up for this to deal with the March and November loads, or are we sort of left asking people, or do we have a way to objectively sort of measure that?
Thank you. Great question. The solid waste, the way that the curbside collection is managed, we are able to get a certain amount of metrics, but to a certain level. So I can't explicitly, we cannot tell you how much organic waste is produced at a single household, but we can give you kind of broader stroke metrics. That being said, there is a fee. So there is not only the utility fee that is in the utility fee schedule that is being proposed today, but there also is an exchange service fee to join the program, as well as to leave the program. And the cost in our current proposed fee schedule is $50. And that is to cover the cost that the district has to pay GFL to deliver that tote to that household or to pick up that tote. So while, and I should also add that currently the program is designed that people will have, or households will have the opportunity to join the program as of January 31st, or the deadline is January 31st for kind of this first launch or intake. But there's only one opportunity currently to opt out of the program, which is October 31st. So while people may join for those larger months of March and November of organic hard waste, they'll have that opportunity to use that tote all year round.
I saw a few hands on this point. I'm going to go to Councillor French, and then I have Councillor Stoner on this point, and then we'll go back to you for your.
So many of my questions have already been answered, but I am going to look for a little bit of clarity. It's sounding to me like this pilot project is going to be integrated with our current collection contract, and I want to be clear. Is my assumption correct there on that?
Thank you, through the mayor. Yes, it is.
Councillor Stoner, on this point, I think was what I was reading from your.
It's tangentially related, and Miss White's in the hot seat, so I thought I'd take the opportunity, which is around just curious what has happened with the glass collection pilot program and why staff are proposing to introduce a new pilot if our pilot from last year hasn't been fully implemented yet, just from a staff capacity perspective.
Great, thank you, through the mayor. So the glass pilot, while staff had hoped to launch it earlier, we did in June and July. I believe it might have run to August as well. Apologize, I don't know the exact date. We ran a survey asking the public where people wanted to see these glass collection areas. So we do have the information and have consolidated it, and staff are currently reviewing the proposed locations from the public to see what would be good locations from an operational point of view, as well as do we have access to that land? Because, for example, there were some requests from the general public to have locations on private land, for example. So there has been limited capacity, honestly, to get that program reviewed and out the door. However, the intent is that it is rolled out before the end of 2024. And the organics program, while it's new, will be done in collaboration with our current curbside collection. So it does increase the financial team's workload a little bit through the registration process. It actually doesn't require very much other work from staff, aside from promoting it.
Okay, Councillor French.
Yeah, okay. And so I think one more on this, and I'll preface it by expressing how I'm aligned with Councillor Anderson around the November and March need. And I know this firsthand from when I lived in a single family home that had a large property and lots of vegetation on it. I think that eventually we're just going to get there. We just have to figure out the budget and the house. So if we pass the recommended staff motion that's in front of us, or something very similar to that, does this essentially mean that council endorses the proposal to offer the additional organic tote program in the pilot project?
Yes, thank you.
Very good. New topic. Thank you, Ms. White. The Malcolm Road Sanitary Sewer Phase 3 upgrade under Highway 99 caught my eye. And I'm wondering, is there or will there be a strategy to ensure that we don't have a repeat of the challenges experienced the last time that we had an installation project in this particular location that was going under the highway?
Good afternoon, Jesse Morwood, Capital Projects Manager. Through the Mayor, thank you for the question. We've tried 2 attempts and they both have been unsuccessful. So it actually leaves really one option, which is a traditional method, which is trenching across the highway. So it is very much a tried and true method. So we are confident in it. The challenge is traffic management on the highway, and that's why we've been avoiding it. But as far as failures and inability to overcome those, it's less of an issue in this methodology. Yeah.
Okay, great. And I think tying in with the earlier attempts that didn't go too well, my recollection is that there's an exposed pipe on the east side of Highway 99 on the southern edge of Malcolm Road. Will this project underground that section of pipe that's still above ground?
Through the Mayor, that is actually a temporary bypass. So it's when we tried to go under the highway, we had to bypass the existing line. So it's actually not, there's actually no sewer being passed through it right now. The intent was to leave it there to save the cost so that when we come back and actually trench across the highway, that we could reuse that bypass. So again, it's not being used right now. The intent is we'd save money to use it when we need to bypass the current sewer line, if that makes sense.
Okay, so does then that mean that once this project is complete, that bypass line will be removed, can be removed?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Greenlaw next, then myself.
Thanks, through the chair. I'm gonna take us. Oh wait, I think Councillor Stoner might have something to say about this.
Thanks.
That's it.
I had a follow up on Councillor French's question.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, team, for spotting that. Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Thanks. I was just curious with the trenching across the highway, is there any opportunity to cost out what it would mean to do the work overnight in order to facilitate or minimize the impact on highway traffic? I just know that's a common refrain that we get when we do work? Because why don't we do it overnight to minimize impacts? And so I'm just curious if we can cost that out.
Through the chair, yeah. So a big part of this, as I mentioned, is the traffic management, and really we have to create a traffic management in order to do it, and we just haven't got to that point in the project yet. So once we get into the detailed planning of it, we will look at that. Inevitably, this will be multiple weeks of work, and so yeah, there's opportunities there, but we have to really look into traffic management.
Okay, Councillor Greenlaw.
Thanks. Through the chair, I'm going to take us back like, I don't know, 10 minutes now and build on some of Councillor Hamilton's line of questioning. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm getting this information misplaced, but my understanding is that our current asset management plan is predicated upon our infrastructure effectively lasting 50% longer than its design lifespan. Am I correct in this?
Through the chair, sorry. The chair, that's correct. For the most part, I believe for solid waste, it's not, but for water, wastewater, and general fund, I have to look back on water. Water might be on 25%.
Okay, thanks. Just wanted some clarity on that. And then the other piece was Councillor Hamilton's questions focused on our existing in-ground infrastructure. Are we covering the infrastructure needed to, in our plans, are we covering the infrastructure needed to service our anticipated population growth in the coming years? Is this covered by development? Would this be in addition to our current estimates?
Through the chair, I'll speak to it, and possibly Mr. Rolston will want to speak to it as well. But the asset management does have a forecast for population growth, which is, yeah, that does. And then in terms of the remaining question, I'm sorry,
Oh, I was just wondering where that was going to be covered if we weren't doing that. But if we're, I just want to make sure we were doing that.
Through the chair, when we develop the financial plan and the capital projects that are within it, it kind of takes care of two components. One is the repair and replacement of existing assets, and the other is to accommodate community growth or increase levels of service. So the growth component doesn't come from the asset management plan. That comes from the master plans. So for instance, our sewer, water, transportation master plan, all of these master plans look at anticipated community growth and determine what capacity upgrades need to be completed in order to accommodate that growth. So we layer those projects in, and they are often funded through DCC funding, grant funding. There's various sources of funding depending on the project.
Okay, thanks.
And thank you for starting us down this path. I'm going to I'll see who wants to answer this one, but in that vein, in the water master plan, which is a September 2015 document, it includes a projection that's 31,525 persons by 2031. And I'm going to say we're ahead of that. I know that this is a plan that we're going to see an update to coming. So in this space between, I'm concerned. I'm just wondering about, there's a lot of pieces that fall into that are in this budget that make good sense, but it's this overarching piece, like how is this sitting? So when the new wastewater treatment plant comes online, are we just striving to hit this 31, or what capacity exists inside of that facility when it comes online? Like those are the kind of, and it's hard because it's not necessarily a particular line item, it's this overarching piece. Like, are we getting this growth piece right in particular? And this is important, I think, throughout the budget, but in particular in the utilities, it seems to be the easiest place to really quantify it, and maybe the most risk as well. So how are you treating that, given that we're trending ahead of what those projections were in 2015?
Through the chair, the population projection that you raised with the 2015 Water Master Plan really highlights why it's so important for us to regularly update our master plans, because despite our best projections, I don't think anyone predicted that the community was going to grow as rapidly as it has over the past 9 years. So our forthcoming Water Master Plan is taking a much more aggressive population growth estimate, being very conservative. So, all of our master plans, as we update them, we are taking into account the latest information and also starting to take this more conservative approach in terms of population growth. So that's really layered into staff judgment when we're preparing these capital projects. And again, really just highlights the need for us to continually be updating our master plans to inform that. With respect to the wastewater treatment plant, it's not a very black and white answer, because there's so many different components of the wastewater treatment plant, and you upgrade one piece, it doesn't necessarily upgrade the entire capacity of the plant. But the project that we're working on right now is expected to provide 10 to 15 years of community growth and meet our redundancy in our permitting and our growth requirements over that time period, using a fairly conservative population growth estimate.
Okay, that's the level. That's an appropriate level of detail for me on that. And I think when you say conservative, I'm going to say that some people would think that that's maybe like the aggressive number, like for looking at aggressive growth, or versus conservative number would generally be considered smaller. I just want to make sure that we're talking the same way, but that's what I'm understanding from your comments. Is that correct?
Yeah, when I say conservative, I mean sort of a worst case growth scenario in terms of what that means for our infrastructure. So a higher growth rate, which would have a greater impact on our infrastructure.
Thank you. I just wanted to flesh out the terminology there. Thank you. That does give me some comfort and does highlight the need to make sure our master plans are up to date. I'm going to move on to a solid waste question. Fee schedule. I noticed that there's some new charges there. I just wondered if you could take us through. Some of them move by not a lot, and some of them seem to be quite substantial. I just wonder if you could speak to the rationale between. And I know generally it's cost recovery of the service, but I'm just curious. There was some that seemed to be a bigger jump.
Yes, apologies, sorry, just confirming that wasn't another part of the presentation. And so the tipping fees that are in the report to council largely, the majority are based on a 5% increase over last year. And the reason for that is that here I'm going to try and say it financial terms, but the expenditures supersede the revenue coming in at the solid waste utility, and therefore we are following the plan that we've had for the past few years of increasing tipping fees by 5%. We actually, the ones that are significant increase are new fees. And so there is, and I'll just list them. One is for RV and boats and trailers, and we do have a requirement that they are dismantled and essentially crushed to a certain size before we take it, as well as appliances with ammonia, cardboard, food waste up to 5 tons per load, glass loads that are over 100 kilos. Those are all new and they all have different rationale. Would you like me to walk you through each one? And I can do it succinctly if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm going to go shorter. I don't need to go through all of them, but just sort of the general concepts that led to where we are.
So there is a few of them are for cost recovery because we are currently being charged more than we are recovering for those specific ones. The glass, I should note, is because we are currently a disposal site for glass collected from Recycle BC for Whistler and Squamish. And so this charge is directly to do a bit of cost recovery on a product that we're taking for free at this point in time. It will not impact, somebody who brings a few pieces of glass to the landfill. And the cardboard and food waste ones, we currently are not offering, nor, they won't be put into place until we're able to offer that service. The idea is that potentially we would offer cardboard and organic food waste for more larger scale, potentially, if somebody, right now we have cardboard that's free before the scale, but you have to use our compactor, which is very slow and time consuming. And so we might offer an easier way to get rid of cardboard, but there might be a fee associated with it because we will be paying more to get rid of it. And same with organic waste.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense, and thank you for running us through that. The short path through. I see some questions from my colleagues here. I'll go ahead, Councillor Hamilton, then Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. On the tipping fees, thanks. I see asbestos listed separate from gypsum. Is that new, this separation between asbestos and I assume asbestos here means drywall, pre-1990 drywall, or is that an incorrect assumption?
Thank you through the chair. Actually, asbestos here is excluding drywall. So largely the pieces of asbestos that we might receive at the landfill are asbestos lined piping. We do not take any pre-1990 drywall at the site no matter what, unless it has a declaration that it is asbestos free.
So a follow-up then on the gypsum. Is there a reason why it's so much? So I looked up the Vancouver tipping fees at the Vancouver landfill, and drywall, assuming it's free of post 1990, is about $200 per ton. Is there a reason why ours is double that?
Thank you through the chair. I can't speak to how Metro Vancouver determines their tipping fee rates. We aren't privy to that level of detail. What I can see on their website is very similar to what you saw as well. But I can speak to why ours costs the way they do, and it is largely because of the cost we pay. So we are ensuring that our gypsum is properly managed. So it goes to a facility called New West Gypsum, where it is processed to create new drywall. And so we have to pay larger, often our tipping fees are larger than Metro Vancouver's because of the trucking that is required to get to the end sites as well. I should add that. So we pay for trucking as well as the processing cost, as well as what our contractor at the landfill charges us for that service.
Councillor Pettingill, did you?
Yeah, I just want to follow up about the earlier question about 30% or sorry, 50% lifespan for our infrastructure assumptions. And that's, we're assuming 50% longer than doing nothing for the lifespan. And we're assuming we achieve that through a reasonable level of maintenance. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Thank you for that. I have another question that is one of the smaller items here, but it's a curiosity, which is we have the experts here. The Plateau Thunderbird Reservoir Condition Assessment. I seem to recall having this on budgets throughout my time here, and does it keep moving, or are we just getting closer to it? What's for something that's quite small? I feel like, I don't know, or maybe I'm misremembering. Can you just speak to I understand the project itself, just the timing and how that's being prioritized, or what the constraints are in getting that piece of work done, and thus having the curiosity satisfied of what's in there.
Through the chair, so that budget has been in the budget for a long time, and there has been some significant deferrals. So the budget included inspection or condition assessment of both the Plateau and the Thunderbird reservoirs. Both of them are bored granite reservoirs, so a truly Squamish piece of infrastructure, not your typical steel. So they're old. They're very challenging to gain access to. And so we've been waiting for construction of the new reservoirs that are essentially complete now at the university in order to provide storage, backup storage, while we take the Plateau Reservoir offline and enable us to complete an inspection of that while maintaining water service to the community. So we've been waiting on that and deferring that. It's very complicated work to actually take these offline to minimize downtime, provide fire protection throughout the whole procedure. So there has been a significant amount of work behind the scenes to scope these inspections and ensure that they're completed efficiently and that they do what we need to do. And that's what's been resulting in these deferrals.
Thank you. I knew it was more complex than it appears in the item, but that interconnectivity makes sense. So thank you for that. Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks. One more question on following up on the extra compost bin program. So do I understand correctly? So a resident would pay $150 per year for an extra organics tote, but an extra recycling tote would be free, except for the exchange fee. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. The recycling totes do not have a utility fee associated with them because the revenue for that is covered through Recycle BC. We are not allowed to charge residents extra for extra recycling.
Great. Okay, so the recycling is a sort of revenue generator. I'll call it. I'm not sure it generates revenue, but yes. Okay. The organics. What is the primary cost associated with the extra organics tote? Is it disposal of the organic waste, or is it the extra time required for collection? Like where is the estimate? Where does the extra cost come from?
Great, thank you through the chair. That's an excellent question. So the $150 proposed utility fee rate increase, or utility fee rate, is the costs that are behind that are the cost that is part of our contract with GFL to add an additional tote at a household. So to have that truck come and service the house, that tote, as well as the organic processing, and then also extra costs for the weekly organics that it will have, the organic pickup, and then administrative costs. And the largest portion of that is actually related to the contract costs that we have to pay to send a truck every week to that house.
Okay, sorry, I think I might be confused. The program is really just that houses that already have organic totes will have 2 totes if they want. Is that correct?
Yes, a household who already should have the 3 totes, like the 3 stream, they can sign up for an additional organics tote.
So the additional contract cost is associated with the GFL picking up the 2 bins at one house instead of 1 bin, correct?
Yes, thank you. I'm not always sure how much I can speak about the contract details, so I'll speak in high level terms, but yes, there is a cost associated with the contract that goes beyond if we want to have another truck come to your house for 2 totes of the same material stream, there's an additional cost.
So I'll give you some, so my thinking here is we want to encourage organics. We want to encourage people putting stuff in their organics totes, just as we want to do for recycling. And so I'm considering distributing the $23,000, the estimated $23,000 budget increase into the overall budget for waste recovery, waste removal, instead of applying an increase to just the people who want to have an extra tote. Basically making the option to have a second tote free, because for $23,000 compared to our $6 million budget, it seems like a fairly small amount to be administering and managing for something we want to be promoting anyways. So I'm trying to get an understanding of what the cost impact would be of running this pilot project at no charge instead of at $150 per household.
Um, I'll start, and I encourage the finance team to support me if they have anything they'd like to add. But as with staff is unsure what the uptake of this program is, we are only anticipating 100 to 150 people, households joining. So that's why we've been able to add this as an extra line item. Not sure if there's anything else to add.
Just further to that, I think that just in terms of the uptake, that is just based on the fee at this time. If there is no fee, the likelihood is the cost will increase because and we wouldn't have that in the budget. So at this point in time, the proposal is a pilot to suss out the demand, and then certainly we could take a look at how we distribute that across the waste program in future years.
Yeah. And just to add that if it was offered for free with the $50 service charge, the cost would be substantial. We have there would be a significant impact on the solid waste utility.
How much?
Thank you through the chair. Staff doesn't have that number in front of them at this point in time. However, we can get it and bring it back.
So Council, I'd be very interested in seeing what the projected cost impact on our budget would be for this mechanism to increase organics waste.
Chair,
Yep, go ahead, Councillor Storm.
I just need clarity. If folks do have additional organics they want to get rid of, they can personally bring them for free disposal at either the landfill, well, now at the landfill, is that correct? So this is really just if people want the additional benefit of having it picked up from their home?
Thank you through the chair. Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Is that true for yard waste?
Yes, thank you. At the landfill, in advance of the scale, there is 2 free organic collection bins for yard waste or food waste.
And Councillor Stoner, yeah, I had you next on on the speakers list, so the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, just to follow up on that and Councillor Hamilton's points, while I see the intention of trying to increase our organics diversion, I wouldn't feel comfortable spreading that cost across all users, given that we know it would probably it's a certain demographic of folks who are living in large single family homes who are using that additional organics tote. There's an option for them already to dispose of it freely. This is if they want the additional luxury of having it picked up from their home. So I think a fee-for-service model is the most appropriate going forward and test out whether that's of actual interest. I think if we do it as a pilot project for free to start with, it's really hard to then add a fee over time. And already I don't think that this would be cost recovery. And so I think for me to straight out the gate, do it as cost neutral across all other users seems unfair as its starting point.
Thank you, Councillor Pennington.
Another question, but I'll leave it at this for now.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. And I take your point earlier that we don't sort of know how much volume of waste each individual house is doing. I vaguely recall we had some discussion that in the future at some point that was going to be possible, and maybe I'm imagining that, or that was sort of just a very pie in the sky idea. But do we have numbers of right now, like this truck is expected to pick up from 500 homes, and we would expect this volume if they were roughly filling up the bins 50% and 100%? Like, do we have sort of at per 500 home level what volume of waste, so we can sort of project, are most people filling their bins 3/4 or 1/4 right now? Do we even have an ability to get that sort of info?
Thank you through the chair. We have the ability to find out how many totes are serviced on a particular day and the total tonnage in that day. So then we could do an average over that with a calculation with that. And that could be provided to council if they wished.
Just on this particular topic around the organics piece, I really see I see the intent. I see where you're going, Councillor Hamilton. I appreciate that. I think I can think of two situations that it's similar to, which is when we were looking at over the last years, we've been looking at the different size of solid waste totes and trying to motivate people in different ways to change behavior. And the work into investigating free transit. And well, the cost associated with was substantial, not just we won't just lose in that case, the ticket, the fare box, but the demand would be so great. The expense goes through the roof at the same time you lose the revenue. So I see a lot of parallels here, and I just caution that I don't think there's enough data to move forward. And I do think that the folks that require this, giving them an option to opt into it, and then weighing out, looking at what the uptake is and what the costs are is an appropriate first step. So I support the pilot project, and I think it's a creative way to address some of the concerns we've been hearing from the community around looking for a higher level of service here. The specific ask may have been for extended weekly pickup, but this gives them capacity just to store for and to still have that diversion rate that they're after and get that service. So I do think that as proposed is the path forward, but a future discussion around the most economical way to deliver the service to the community is very important as part of this discussion annually. But I think that this pilot project will feed into that in future, and perhaps we go to more folks in the community having access to this and that being included. But there is also a cost associated with it. So if we're incredibly successful in this endeavor, which is the goal, we need to be mindful that we're not digging our hole in another way. So so I'm supportive of the approach as proposed, but that discussion that you're looking to have, I think is best suited for with an extra piece of data or two that we need to achieve through this pilot project. Councillor Stoner, did you have something else for us? I think we've gone through, unless anyone else wants to comment on this particular point. So did you have another question or another topic for us?
I did have another quick question, just of clarity in the utility reserve continuity summaries. Which in each of them there's a line item called fiscal services, and I noticed that the values vary quite a bit between the utilities. And for wastewater, there is no expenditure in this category past 2026. So I'm just wondering if staff can speak to what falls under the fiscal services and why there might be a gap after 2026 in wastewater.
Thank you for the question through the chair. So first, to start with what fiscal services is, and then get into the specific line items in each of the utilities. Fiscal services is a project that is utilized for debt servicing costs, amortization, and also adding to the asset retirement obligation liability, which you'll also hear called as accretion expense. So when you get into each of the utilities for solid waste, the reason that it is quite a bit larger and longer than the other utilities is due to the landfill post-closure costs that we contribute to the landfill liability, as well as in 2025, there's also the landfill vertical expansion debt that is being paid for from the capital reserve. When we look at wastewater, wastewater doesn't actually have any asset retirement obligations that need to be contributed to. However, it does have smoothing of allocations that Ms. Boxrud spoke to earlier in the opening of the presentation that is being done over 2 years. And then lastly, for the water fund, it is for the asset retirement obligation to fund water fund capital assets that have an asset retirement obligation at end of life. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. Council, just a reminder that we're getting to the end of the time allotted for this. We do have a staff recommendation we're trying to work towards dealing with. So that's the decision at hand today. I've heard some, I've heard one item that I think the answer from staff was that it was likely to be removed. That's the wastewater piece tied to workforce accommodation. And I just wanted to understand where we were on that, given that it's in the package we received and thus is captured in the motion that's presented, and just how we should contemplate that one if it was to be removed, whether by direction of council or just in the fact that it was sort of seems like it's being recommended to be removed by staff in the answer. So could I just get some clarity on that particular item? Or do we need a timeout to get that one? Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to recess for 5 minutes. We'll come back shortly after 3:30. All right, we're back from a short break, and I will turn the floor over to staff. I don't know who wants to get us answer the question. Go ahead.
Thank you, through the mayor. Appreciate the timeout, just to make sure that staff are aligned and we can provide a recommendation to council. The reason that position was still in the budget was, and recognizing that budget changes weekly and it's hard to keep up, but it had more to do with the Fortis work camp and a placeholder. And now that the work lodge is no longer happening, that staff would be amenable and recommend that if council would like to pass a motion to endorse the utility budget with the removal of that one placeholder for the wastewater treatment staff to be funded from the projects. Just for clarity, as it relates to the WLNG flotel, council did provide feedback through the environmental assessment certificate process that the proponent did take into consideration. So their current waste management plans indicate that they will barge wastewater off of the flotel to another site, not to the District of Squamish wastewater treatment plant. That also occurred when the treatment plant couldn't handle it from a capacity point of view. So that is the extent of council's direction, was through that feedback process. But given that the management plans currently have WLNG barging the waste off-site and there's no Fortis work camp, then a motion to remove that and endorse the utility budget without it is recommended.
Okay, so that was on this point.
Oh, I was just going to move that. What as suggested?
Yeah, and the line item was 96301114, if I have my notes correct. So with that item removed, moved by Councillor Pettingill as our seconder. I'll second it. Would you like to speak to it at all, Councillor?
Yeah, I think all things considered, this budget does make sense. I am overall really pleased to see our long-term plans, our asset management and master plans really coming into play here, which gives me a lot more comfort with what's here. The landfill piece scares me just because there's such a big project and there's so many unknowns. I do think, I will save it for a separate discussion, but I think there's been other policy and discussions that, from my perspective, would be informing both staff and council decisions in terms of discretionary items related to wood fiber and Fortis. We can have that discussion another day, I guess. I will actually and see where I deal with it, but just sort of as a heads up, in terms of other things that might be in our budget for discretionary work for the benefit of these projects, I would have concern with that in our budgets. And so, we may need to think about when we have that discussion. But for the utility budget with this change, I think it seems like a good plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, speaking in support, it is remarkable how much work goes into these plans. As I'm looking out at a gallery full of our very capable staff that have worked on this. I enjoyed the discussion today around the various pieces of this, and have been more than satisfied with the responses. And I think it's highlighted to me the interconnected nature of so many of these pieces. And I think what we have before us now is responsible and prudent, and keeps us to the best of our knowledge up to the pace of growth. And I appreciate that there's an evergreening of these, an update coming to some of the master plans that feed into this work that'll continue to keep us in the position that we are, which I think is well positioned to handle the challenges of and opportunities that growth is bringing to the community. So I'll be supporting. Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'll also be speaking in support of this utility service budget, the utilities budget. My I'd like to make sure that we keep an eye on the two major pieces, the cost of the landfill and the cost of the utility or the wastewater, the headwater facility. As we all know, costs change over time. So I hope that we're keeping an up-to-date eye on how those costs may be changing over time, so we don't find ourselves sort of 1 year out from a major cost, from a major expense, finding ourselves at significant cost, unexpected cost escalations. I know staff's aware of that. On the next major piece of this budget, which is the in-ground, the annual upgrades and annual upkeep of the underground infrastructure. Really like to, yes, absolutely, more of it. What was it? Yes, yes, and more. Let's make sure that our underground infrastructure is in place. And if staff have a concern that we should be moving from a 1.5-year lifespan to a 1.25 lifespan for any of our infrastructure, please do please inform council of that recommendation. I firmly believe that our underground infrastructure costs a lot less money to keep up to date than it does to upgrade. On the next largest piece of this budget, that mainly concerns DCCs. I sincerely hope to see the DCC and ACC bylaws coming forward soon, so that we can ensure that our DCC bylaw and the costs we're recovering with our DCC bylaw are keeping up with the expenditures we're seeing, because it appears right now as if that's not quite the case. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor French.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to speak in favor of the motion, and in doing so, I'll jump up onto my soapbox and point out the obvious, that landfills are expensive, and this budget is underscoring that more than ever. I mean, this is budget number 6 for me, and every year I just see the cost of landfilling increasing, and I don't see it ever coming down. And residents can help themselves in helping to keep taxation lower by simply diverting kitchen and yard waste into the organic bin, and ensuring that those recyclable natural resources do not go into our landfill and thus contribute to making an already expensive venture even more costly. All right, off my soapbox. I support the motion.
Thank you for the soapbox detour. Councillor Anderson, then Greenlaw.
Thank you. Also speaking in favor of the motion, I'd like to highlight a couple of areas. I would like to applaud the solid waste team's initiative of the pilot project. And in contrast to some comments I've heard from a colleague, I don't think that the yard waste volumes are always so practical to deliver to the landfill. And they are, not everyone has a pickup or that transport need. When the organics pickup program was introduced several years ago, I recall, and I was present when the former solid waste manager made a presentation to the gardening club promising a solution, but that isn't what has evolved. We've catered to other priorities with that program. We have a stubborn problem of risks in various neighborhoods. In my own neighborhood, I have, my neighbors and I have literally tons of cedar deadfall as a problem, and it's very flammable, a high-risk issue. And in fact, I believe my neighborhood may be a candidate for this pilot program if we can target it for the right time of year. But I think that it's not a practical idea for everybody to be driving with a pickup up to the landfill. It is not a luxury program in my view, and we should be looking to not have disincentives for people to manage this yard waste and related material. Secondly, and it's a more general comment, as I look at the big budget number for addressing the headworks building, I have to wonder, when we do our tours from time to time with folks like Mr. Konashenko, Mr. Story and their teams, we learn that our staff have liaison with other municipalities, other facilities managers, And it occurs to me that they may be together recognizing issues with our funding programs from senior governments that maybe we're not picking up on in our advocacy efforts. So are elected officials aware of the need and opportunity for advocacy vis-a-vis senior government for these funding programs? And I'm sure that if our staff have suggestions, they do come forward with suggestions regarding regulations or legislation this past year for the UBCM Convention on latecomer agreements being registered untitled. But if you have suggestions regarding funding programs and how they work or are not working, I'm sure we would be all ears. That's a very steep number, and I'm sure we're not alone around the province in facing these kinds of issues with our facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Greenlaw and then Stoner. You're up.
I just wanted to jump on Councillor French's soapbox with him about the expense of expanding our current landfill, and really just start to drive home some of the lifestyle changes that people can make. This is Circular Economy Month, and it's not just about diverting your organics to a compost pile, but also reconsidering your consumption style in general. And when you are out there purchasing, really consider what waste is being produced from what you are purchasing, because that is the real crisis that we are in globally. And also a lot of environmental initiatives are also incredibly cost effective. And in this time of people being really concerned about inflation and the cost of living, that's an important consideration that you can also, it is also a way of voting with your dollars to consider items that are less harmful to the environment, less harmful to your pocketbook, and less harmful to our landfill, our precious, precious landfill. So thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Stoner.
Thank you, through the chair. I will be supporting the motion on the floor. In principle, I think that this is going in the right direction. Appreciate the ongoing effort of this council and past councils to get our asset management reserves in place and continue to adhere to that. I think that's really important. We've seen the challenges of not doing so in the past and trying to catch up. So I think that that's a really valuable piece of work. It's also interesting to see the landfill coming into the 5-year financial plan, having talked about it for quite a while and trying to do everything we can to extend the life of our current landfill. The reality is upon us that we're now looking at the bigger ticket items. And so appreciate staff's due diligence on that project. And hopefully our community is listening and watching. That still every little piece of material that we can divert matters. So thanks to my fellow council colleagues for their soapbox speeches. I won't continue to go in that direction. My one request for staff in the coming back for tying it all together would be to have some clarity on where that 2.3% operating from water has been absorbed into, just to get a better sense of what is being covered by that additional operating dollars that have been moved from wastewater. With the 2 FTEs being moved over to wastewater, it'd be interesting to know what's being covered in that operating component. So that would be my one request going forward that I still have a question about. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill, do you want to? Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion, any opposed? Yeah, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I wonder if this is a quick opportunity. A few of us spoke about the landfill and the cost of the landfill, and I think it came through in an email, but we do have a challenge from Councillor Greenlaw about the circular economy and keeping things out of the landfill. And I'm just asking actually for a reminder of what the deadline is for that, and if you can maybe add some public accountability to us in terms of this challenge.
Councillor Greenlaw.
Well, I was thinking the first meeting in November, which I think is the 5th. And circular economy is a huge, broad topic that touches everything. And like I said, like it does, I mean, I get that it might sound like a trivial challenge, but this is incredibly important work. This is something that fundamentally needs to shift in our society, is how we consume our resources and how we produce that. And I firmly believe that as somebody who spent 15 years looking for resources for us to consume. And so on that note, I like these soapboxes, John. On that note, I think like it's a super broad topic. So if you want to go for food waste, you know, I'll start making stock, start actually a nice thing to do. This is a bit of a tangent, but not like select items that are less packaged. Ever since COVID, there's been way more packaging around food and it really upsets me, but yeah. So you can do food waste upgrades. You could do mending projects. Last year, I think Councillor Pettengill fixed a cuckoo clock and Councillor Stoner looked into laundry stripping, which is a way of extending your fabrics and your materials. Yeah. I know Councillor Anderson's got some sweaters that need mending. Just saying. I can help you out on that too. Yeah, and just a challenge to council to just find ways to be more conscious of what you're consuming and what you're producing as waste is really one of them. Was that close enough? Do you want more descriptions? So public hold us accountable for doing circular economic things.
I look forward to that conversation, but I'm going to move us on, not because I'm not interested in that very important and timely conversation, but we're going to move on with our agenda. I understood that there were some slides that we didn't get to that we're going to need to deal, or is there anything there that we can't do at tying it all together at our next touch point?
Thank you. Through the chair, we can absolutely bring in, just conscious of time, we can absolutely bring a summary of the presentation that was intended on reserves and borrowing to the tying it all together.
Okay, I think that's our path forward here. So thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 3.2, which is appointment of corporate officer. Do we have, Mr. Stoner, were you going to speak to this briefly or at length if you prefer?
Really briefly, we need a corporate officer and a deputy corporate officer.
Okay, and we have a recommendation as to who should fill those positions, moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor French. Can we do these both together? Yes, we are doing these both together. That was the intent of both. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. I'm looking for a motion to close. Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor Greenlaw. All in favor? Motion carries. We'll recess and reconvene at 4 o'clock.